Acknowledgement. The following message uses information from Wikipedia, Google, various articles and podcasts, summarizations from artificial intelligence, all somewhat verified by other sources, also probably not error-free, and my own memories for what they're worth. Additionally, I must also acknowledge that this message was written under the influence of Alka-Seltzer Plus severe cold formula. (1964). Still grieving the assassination of President Kennedy, we witnessed the beginning of a war that was not called a war, not in 1964. President Johnson signed the Gulf of Tonkin Act, giving him all necessary actions to do, including military force if you need him, for this Vietnamese non-war in 64. And there's much more, including the Civil Rights Act of 1964, changing political loyalties in the South forevermore, or so it seemed. King won the Peace Prize. China tested an atomic bomb. The Beatles invaded and brought some new songs. Freedom riding students from the North were slaughtered in the South. More rumblings in the street. Times were changing, there's no doubt. Meanwhile, my heart was broken by my first boyfriend. I cried myself to sleep and thought the sorrow would never end. And there was much more in 1964. I had a bad fall from my skateboard, and I still feel sore. All that and much more in 1964. One of the happenings of 1964 was the release of that album by Bob Dylan, including the title song, "The Times They Are A-Changin'." He never released that song as a single in the U.S., but it was covered by many, many others, including Peter, Paul, and Mary have a great rendition of it. And, of course, one we just heard by Burl Ives, and there are others. I thought that this song would be a good sacred text for this message on MLK Sunday, our Justice Sunday. It is a prophetic text, for it still has much meaning for us today, maybe even more meaning today than in 1964, as we enter a time like we've never faced before, with so many in powerful positions who hold sway over future possibilities for us and others. Does this prophet Dillon, previously known as Robert Zimmerman, have a message for us today? And why should we listen to him anyway? Y'all, we couldn't get tickets on Christmas Day, but on Boxing Day, Greg secured seats, separate but equal, in the Mall Theater in the suburbs of Chicago, so that he, his mom, and me could see the movie A Complete Unknown. I think it's here now. Of course, Dillon wasn't unknown for long, especially after he sang this song. Is Bob Dylan a prophet? Well, that's what I contend, or pretend, or portend, and I'll extend that declaration and defend this proclamation with an exegesis of this text. No, I did not say exit Jesus. Jesus is always welcome here at the Unitarian Universalist of Coastal Georgia. Exegesis is simply a term that means an examination or interpretation of text, often scripture, but not necessarily. For who is to define what is scripture? I've selected three themes: a trinity, if you'll accept this construct in this Unitarian gathering, and we'll attempt to provide some explanation or expectation or revelation for those who hope to thrive or maybe survive in 2025 and beyond, when hopefully MAGA will be just a sad saga we share. The first theme of the song is the inevitability of change, reflected right there in the title. Now, as Unitarian Universalists, we lift up and revere change. What does the T stand for in JETPIG? Anybody know? Transformation. We like truth too. But the T in JETPIG is, which is the JETPIG, y'all, is what we use for our children and others to know our shared values: justice, equity, transformation, pluralism, interdependence, and generosity. Think about that generosity later today during the announcement time. Okay. The T stands for transformation. So we lift up change. And when we lift it up, we are really thinking about positive change, aren't we? And even we don't want everything to change. Unitarian Theodore Parker wrote a famous sermon that was somewhat controversial in his day called A Discourse on the Transient and Permanent in Christianity. He was arguing that while the outward forms and traditions of Christianity may change over time, and they have, and we evolved from that as well, the core principles of love, justice, and morality remain eternally true and unchanging. And it's these permanent aspects of our faith that matter. A more recent UU ancestor, Forrest Church, wrote a book about the American Creed. It's quite good if you want to read a good book about our history and think about the American Creed, that was outlined by Thomas Jefferson in the Declaration of Independence about those truths which should be self-evident and unchanging. This is the creed that Martin Luther King Jr. lifted up with his dream that this country might someday, quote, rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We encourage changes that will more fully help us to live up to these core values, but the changes we fear this year may wash those values away if we are not ready to resist, to persist in a way that will work. Those of us living in Southeast Georgia have a recent realistic model to guide us. We recently had horrible hurricanes and storms come through. Those of you who've traveled here from somewhere else may not have witnessed that, but you probably saw it on television. And the sides of many of our roads in Southeast Georgia still have mounds of trees that have fallen on the sides of the road in its path. But y'all, the storm did not get them all. Hallelujah. The trees that could bend and swerve and have some flexibility made it through. And that's what we're going to have to do, folks, in the coming years. We need to hold on as best we can to our values, yet find ways to bend and swerve, give and take, go over and under the waves of misinformation and misguided maneuvers till the storm has passed. And we will do that with help from each other. The second theme of Dillon's song is inclusivity. Inclusivity, which is one of our values we lift up, with justice and equity for all. He says, come gather around people wherever you roam and admit that the waters around you have grown. We are not in a small pond of similar tadpoles anymore. This is a teeming ocean with all kinds of creatures, great and small, even right here in Brunswick, Georgia. And you'd better start swimming or sink like a stone, for the times they are a-changin'. This ain't no private pool we're in, folks. We have to swim with others and help one another and love one another. Dillon calls out to writers and prophets who prophesize with their pens, as well as to politicians, great and small. All are called to hear his message. It's for everyone. Now, I've heard folks talk about moving and trying to find somewhere that folks were more like us. Have you heard those conversations? Some of us may have even been in some of those conversations. And, of course, we do have neighbors who have a very different view of our world. Yet, we still have commonalities we can work on together. We just have to find each other and encourage one another. One reason I come to church, too. And we have to find ways to be more interactive and work together with family members and neighbors who may not share all of our values. We need to work with them and be willing to focus on the values we do share as we move forward. In Brunswick, many of us have worked to reach across theological and even political divides to feed the hungry and keep people warm. And in Statesboro, my other community, we are reaching out and working closely with the Catholic Church, Hail Mary, who differ with us on many things, but who are as concerned as we are about our immigrant families. The third thing, and one that's especially evident for me at this time in my life, is that there's a generational shift that we have to accept and appreciate. Come, mothers and fathers throughout the land, and don't criticize what you can't understand. Example, TikTok. Your sons and your daughters are beyond your command. Your old road is rapidly aging. Please get out of the new one if you can't lend your hand, for the times they are a-changing. Wow, that's hard for some of us who've been doing this work for so long. But we need to listen to that prophetic voice. I'm trying to do just that. I'm retiring from the Statesboro Church in June of this year, and I plan to retire from the Brunswick Church in June of 2027, if I can stay healthy and if I'm able that long, and if you want me to stay, okay? Okay. Now, let me tell y'all, we've got a lot of wise elders in our UU congregations. And I lift them up. And some of us have realized, though, that other folks may find different ways of doing things than the way we've always done it, maybe. And that's okay. All of us need to learn to listen and know when to step forward and when to step back a little. Okay? Now, don't get me wrong, folks. We still greatly need our seniors to serve and volunteer. You are the ones with great knowledge and, frankly, with some time. But we do need to encourage and listen to younger folks and different folks as well. We will have to overcome the difficulties that lie ahead of us, and to do that, we need to listen to others and see what their ideas are. Because, folks, the times, they are changing. You see, me and Joe B., we heard that melody and are stepping back. But that old DJ scratched on through. Shame on you. You may have noticed that the title of this message had two parts. The first was the title of this song, The Times They Are Changing. And the second part was a question. Shall we overcome? Shall we overcome? That was an obvious reference, of course, to that song that became a theme song for the civil rights movement in the 60s and 70s, We Shall Overcome. And my response was, of course, yes, we shall overcome. We must overcome. Now, this song, We Shall Overcome, was adapted from a gospel song by Highlander music director Zephia Horton and Highlander musician Pete Seeger from the singing of the striking tobacco workers from the 1945-1946 Charleston cigar factory strike. Shortly afterwards, it was published by folk singer Pete Seeger in something that he called the People's Songs Bulletin. And Pete himself taught it to many in both the labor movement and the civil rights movement in the 50s. Then Highlander Guy Carawan taught the song to the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, also known as SNCC, at their first convening at Shaw University, and they loved it. And the rest is history. I thought since Pete Seeger had a primary role, not only in teaching and publishing this song, but also in promoting Bob Dylan and his music, since he and Woody Guthrie were some of the first people that heard these songs and helped him to have a bigger stage. So since Pete did that, I thought we should bring in his voice to lead us in his call and response method that he used when he sang it at many of his concerts. Now, Pete was one of us, a Unitarian Universalist. And I actually heard him lead this song at General Assembly many years ago. You don't need any words. You just listen to Pete, and he'll guide you while we sing. This is going to be how I close this message, y'all. And I suggest that we stand to sing this song as we close this message. And since some of us have been sick, I suggest we don't hold hands, but maybe we lock arms. Can you lock arms? We can sway together and join Pete and me as we sing this sacred melody. I'll stand here and be locking virtually with the people on Zoom. So here he is. And just listen. He'll tell you what to sing, okay? If you'll rise and get ready, and when he starts singing, you can join in with him. Can you lock your arms together? Move over into the aisle if you need to, or overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. Listen for him to tell you what's next. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. We shall live in peace. We shall live in peace. We shall live in peace. We shall live in peace someday. Oh, deep in my heart,
For everybody else a lesson. Oh, we owe the people that learn how to compromise, learn how to take it easy and be polite and get along. And leave things as they were. The young people call us all a lesson.
We are not afraid. We are not afraid. We are not afraid. Today. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. The whole wide world around. Whole wide world around. The whole wide, everybody. The whole wide world around someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. Yes, we will. Yes, we will. You may be seated. Whew. Now, I'm going to ask Carolyn to come up here and tell us what's going to happen next.